the world watched as South Africa mourned the death of their former president Nelson Mandela on Tuesday. But some deaf viewers were surprised to see when the interpreter that was there was doing nothing more than swatting flies from away from his face. Well, today I'm going to be joined by Paul Simmons. He has a master's degree in deaf education from McDaniel College. He was a deaf activist in South Africa. He also taught for a time at a college there. And he also inspired the deaf community in South Africa as well. And he is here today to give us his take on the misinterpretation during that ceremony. So, Paul, you were tuned in watching the ceremony with the rest of the world. What was going through your mind as you were watching the interpreter?
Well, when I was first informed by a friend that they sent me a message saying, "Is this South African Sign Language? Because I can't understand it." I didn't think much of it initially because I thought there was a good explanation. There are some much better interpreters than others. And I was at home and doing some work at the time. And then later when I looked into it and I saw that the so-called sign language, it immediately struck me that it followed no rule of sign language at all. And in fact, I contacted a friend in South Africa, and many of my friends there responded similarly that they couldn't understand it at all. And that was the very beginning of the controversy. And it wasn't really interpreting at all.
And so as you were watching, and you're able to see that he wasn't signing in Zulu as what they were first reporting. And what was he speaking any words that were coherent or actual real words?
No, not at all. And to say that he was signing in Zulu Sign Language is not true at all.
Mm.
That there is only South African Sign Language. And there are, however, many different variations, many dialects. But Zulu Sign Language, no, not at all.
And there was also a female interpreter. Was she using an international sign language? She was definitely, her version of interpretation was much different than his, obviously.
The female interpreter that you saw just so happens to be a good friend of mine, and she signed South African Sign Language in her work. And indeed, South African Sign Language is very different than Irish Sign Language or British Sign Language or American Sign Language. Each has its own signs, and there are, however, often grammatical rules that are similar across languages, but the languages are certainly not the same. This is true of any language, any spoken language that we see. There are some similarities to be found between languages, but they're not the same language at all.
And so one of the controversies with his signing was that the crowd in the audience clearly booed the president there. So how important is it to make that gesture that the crowd was booing, and why do you think that he kind of withheld that?
Well, he didn't know how to say it, probably. Well, and it may be that the interpreter wasn't sure if the president was being booed or he himself.
Well, apparently this man had signed before. He had signed on behalf of the president before as well. So how did he even get in there? Twice.
Actually, this was the fourth.
Wow.
The fourth time. Now, the fourth that I know of.
And so it seems like you have to have a great deal of understanding to be able to be an interpreter at such a huge international event. How does someone actually get a position like that?
Well, this actually brings up a great question because we have so many outstanding interpreters in South Africa, highly qualified interpreters with wonderful skills. So why he was chosen, I have no idea. I believe that people had already complained about this interpreter in the past, but no action was taken.
And from our understanding here in America, obviously, if someone had been in a mental institution or they were clearly taking medication for schizophrenia or something, as this man claims to be, he would be nowhere near the president, let alone 3 feet from hundreds of very important people at such an important event like this. Is there maybe a difference there in South Africa where they maybe don't see that as such a problem and they kind of gave him a pass?
No, not at all. So the problem, though, is that we don't have standards set yet. Now, I'm not sure if there is a certification process at all currently, but I know that when I was in South Africa 3 years ago, they were in the process of developing standards. That was in the process of being worked on to develop interpreting standards.
Ah. And then, so what's been the reaction by the South African and the international signing community for him being there, but then as far as now what he's come out to say was the reason why?
The community is very upset. And I've had an interesting conversation with one of my academic colleagues recently because we couldn't really agree on whether this should be called language apartheid or communication apartheid. And we've actually had quite a discussion about it for some time, and because there is a controversy out there about whether this is more of a communication apartheid or language apartheid. And in discussion, we've actually come to an agreement that, or my colleague and I agreed that this is more a case of communication apartheid.
And can you explain that?
Sure. I say that because communication apartheid happens when one language is ignored in favor of another. So, given that, interpreters were provided, you could say, but so they can make the claim that they're not ignoring sign language, but that interpreter couldn't sign at all. So that is really a case of communication apartheid.
And so
in fact, I'm quite aware that in South Africa, South Africa as a whole has ratified the UN Convention, the CRPD it's called, and the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This was ratified in 2007. In fact, South Africa was one of the first countries to ratify. So Article 21 of that convention speaks to access of information.
And so is this, with this ratification, is this something that the signing community should work towards, these standards, so that these kind of world events can be understood by those who watch?
Yes, that's correct. But what's happened here is they've hired the wrong person, and this is because there was no involvement of the deaf community or the signing community in the selection.
Right. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add, Paul, that we can all kind of think about with this situation?
For a very long time, a great deal of time, sign language has been considered a pariah. So it's been seen as a less sophisticated language, looked down upon by others. And so only very recently in history have we seen it, we've seen the advent of baby sign, and so all of a sudden people see this as a wonderful tool, a positive reinforcement for infants who are hearing. Now, however, we still don't see it's seen that sign language is bad to expose to deaf babies in people's minds.
That's interesting.
So this shows that sign language, we have seen from research, we know that the use of sign language increases esteem and connection between the infant and parent well before the infant can speak in hearing children.
So it's actually much more sophisticated.
Yes, so now for deaf infants, however, by and large, they're told no. If deaf infants sign, then they'll ignore speech. They won't speak. And this is, in fact, a huge issue, because by taking away signed language from deaf people raised this way often have greater difficulty with literacy, often have more emotional difficulties, and so forth. So this is why I say that signed language is a human right. It's a human right. And that should be recognized.
Absolutely.
And allowed to happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for giving us your time. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to InfoWars Nightly News this evening. Join us here again tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central. Now you can watch The Alex Jones Show live as it happens at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at Infowars.com/show.
The InfoWars crew absolutely loves coffee because we love being awake. And I am somewhat of a connoisseur of coffee. So many times you go to a restaurant or even to a coffee shop and the coffee tastes like garbage. And in all the different coffees I've tried, my favorite is grown in the high mountains, in shade, Arabica, on the border with Guatemala in southern Mexico by the Chiapas farmers. I make sure we've done the research. I make sure it's the very best product that we can offer you when I put my name on it. And I believe, and it's my taste, so you may differ, that this is the best coffee in the world from southern Mexico. Wake Up America Patriot Blend, 100% organic, Arabica shade grown. And then we have the Immune Support 100% organic coffee infused with a special type of mushroom known to boost the immunity.
This coffee is seriously so smooth. I normally have to douse my coffee with cream and sugar and cinnamon and all kinds of tasty treats, but this, I drink this black. It is so good.
Well, that's why I like it, is that it has a kick, it has really good caffeine in it, it has a good clean wake up that lasts for a long time, doesn't give me a headache, but it's so smooth, it's so delicious. Just try it out for yourself. I'm telling you, this is my favorite coffee. We went through a lot of trouble to bring you this. Just try it, and I think you'll be hooked like we are here at InfoWars. Well, folks, find out for yourself and support the information war today. It's all available at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.